We have lots to discuss here in today's video, including plenty of NHL trade chatter, including a potential goalie move involving the Montreal Canadiens. Word is they may be looking for an upgrade and might be interested in a cup-winning goaltender with the St. Louis Blues. We'll discuss that possibility, plus some chatter between the Canucks and the Flyers appear to be ongoing. Plus, we also have some trade talk around the future of Laurent Broissoit in Chicago, as well as the Buffalo Sabres and some of their top talent. We also have the new announcement regarding the 2026 Heritage Classic. The next edition of the Canadian Winter Outdoor Game has been announced. Plus, we have a big signing in Tampa with Ryan McDonagh and several injury updates and a few other notes as well coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have plenty to discuss here in today's video. All kinds of NHL newsworthy news, some trade talk here, which we'll get to in a few minutes. One of the bigger news items that came across today came earlier when the Lightning have announced that they've extended veteran defenseman Ryan McDonagh. Of course, this was a little bit of a surprise. McDonagh is approaching the end of his contract, as we know. He himself even commented that he was kind of expecting this to kind of basically play out till the end of the year and kind of reevaluate where things were at that point in time. The negotiations, he said, kind of took him by surprise. It was initiated by the Lightning general manager, Julien Brisebois. They've extended him for 3 years at $4.1 million. So this contract will take him from age 36 to 39. The breakdown of the contract on the $4.1 million, he gets $3.1 million in salary every year and $1 million in signing bonus. There's also a full no move clause throughout the duration of the contract. And because the way it's structured, it is considered a 35 plus buyout proof contract. So if anything happens and he retires, they do not get the cap relief. So Ryan McDonagh is going to be playing in Tampa by the looks of things until he's about 39 years of age. Obviously, I'm sure he has every desire and intention on doing that. Of course, with a player like McDonagh, who's had plays a rugged style of game, defends, blocks shots, obviously a lot of wear and tear on the body. So he's still playing at a pretty good level. So there's no doubt that there's interest there. I certainly understand that. I'm just curious to see how this will work out for him in the coming years. But obviously, for right now, it's a pretty good bargain contract based on the current play, and hopefully he can keep it up and it works out well for the Lightning. As I mentioned as well, we also got a big announcement from the NHL just a short time ago, earlier tonight, about the Heritage Classic returning. Of course, we know the Heritage Classic is not something you get every year like the Winter Classic, mainly because it's usually, obviously, it's in Canada, not a lot of Canadian teams, so there's no point in doing it every year. So the 2026 Heritage Classic is going to be hosted in Winnipeg on October the 25th, 2026. It's going to be held at the Princess Auto Stadium, which is the home of the CFL's Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That stadium has a capacity of about 32,000 fans. So obviously opportunity there to get outdoors and the time of year where it's not too frigid. Of course, we know Winnipeg is known for its harsh winters for sure. So the fact that it's in October and not later is probably a good thing. I think it's cold enough there that time of year. Obviously, Montreal and Winnipeg should put on a good show, and it should be a pretty good spectacle. Like I said, we don't always get the Canadian teams doing as many outdoor games because it's usually most often two American teams doing the Winter Classic on January 1st. So nice to see them bring back the Heritage Classic, which we usually only get every few years or so. Several injury updates and roster moves here today. The Ottawa Senators recalled centerman Stephen Halliday. He was up with the club and played a few games on their recent road trip. Was returned to Belleville after the team got healthy, but they've got a few little minor nicks that they're working on here. Apparently, defenseman Artem Zub and centerman Lars Eller are both considered day-to-day with either minor ailments, injuries. They didn't really divulge a whole lot on what's going on with each player. Both players played in their last game in Montreal the other night, played regular shifts, and there wasn't really anything obvious, in my opinion, to note injuries, but obviously things can happen that aren't always as noticeable, and it doesn't sound like either is a serious situation. The Senators already had Dennis Gilbert recalled as an extra defenseman, so they'll bring up Halliday and have themselves a full lineup tonight. The San Jose Sharks have reassigned forward Pavel Regenda to the American Hockey League. He has scored a goal last night. Unfortunately, the Sharks had a blowout loss to the Capitals, but he was the one player to light the lamp. The Philadelphia Flyers, so they've also confirmed another injury, and young defenseman Cam York is considered day-to-day with an upper body injury. The Canucks have done some more maneuvering as well, returning goalie Yuri Patera to the AHL, but then recalling goalie Nikita Tolopilo and defenseman Elias Pettersson. So, yeah, they were just sent down, obviously, so with the new rules, you do have to play a game. But I do wonder, though, because I think the total Pilo for sure, maybe Pettersson, they might have been recalled, I believe, on emergency basis, and there might be an exception in that particular case to playing the one game. I'm not completely certain because it was so quick. I don't know the AHL schedule. I don't obviously follow it quite as closely as the NHL, so we'll see. Either way, they're back up at the big club. In Boston, we get confirmation on Michael Callahan's moving to injured reserve, and they've recalled defenseman Victor Soderstrom. This will be an opportunity for him to get into the lineup this evening and for Soderstrom to make his Bruins debut, so we'll see how things go for him there. The Lightning have recalled goaltender Brandon Halverson as well, and Braden Point was officially added to injured reserve to make room on the roster. Montreal Canadiens today also returned defenseman Adam Engstrom and forward Florian Jacki, both returning to the American Hockey League after getting recalled and getting into a little bit of NHL action. A couple of other non-notes here that are not rumor related, but a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Wanted to extend our condolences to Elias Pettersson. That's the centerman, not the D or what they call DPD there in Vancouver, but Elias Pettersson and his fairly new wife Caitlin, who they kind of quietly got married this past summer. Caitlin's an American-born social media influencer. They've opened up in a recent interview article here, acknowledging, based on what she also did some social media posts, acknowledging that they were expecting their first child, and unfortunately she suffered a miscarriage. So she was due to be giving birth next July. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen at this point. So based on that, it looks like she would have been pretty early in the pregnancy in the first trimester, but certainly a very sad piece of news. You don't really want to see anybody go through that. I certainly want to wish their condolences, and hopefully they, are able to carry on and, successfully have future children here. But obviously it's a big loss, and just want to acknowledge the sad news for the Pettersson family, and hope that they're doing okay under the circumstances. The other piece of news that came across today, we had talked about back it was a few months ago or maybe a few weeks ago. I can't remember exactly when the news originally had broken, but there was a case being brought against former NHLer Ryan Kesler. Of course, longtime Canuck, played with Anaheim a little bit. Ryan Kesler was facing some charges based on what we were told was an underage female accusing him of assault. So it certainly didn't sound good, but of course, as we know, things are always, people are innocent until proven guilty. They go through the trial if need be. So they've gone through the early stages of this case, and it is heading to trial. So a lot of that information will likely become a little bit more public. We'll probably learn a little bit more about what went down. What we have learned so far here today is apparently the girl making the accusations and pressing charges is now 17 years of age, and apparently is a friend of his daughter. So, like I said, a lot of these cases sound horrible, and we'll see as the trial proceeds what we learn, and if he ends up being found guilty or not guilty or what have you. So certainly not a good situation for the former longtime NHL forward who was often mentioned in the Selke conversation, a really good two-way forward, but things are not so good spot in life right now. So we'll see how things proceed there. Another quick note before we jump into the trade talk, something that was brought up today, just as a FYI for everybody. We already know this is coming, but there is going to be a holiday roster freeze, which I do wonder if it could spawn some activity, because we have a couple of different points this year in the schedule where there's going to be a break. Of course, we have the holiday roster freeze, which happens every year. Then you're going to, after that, have the Olympic break, and then after that, you have the trade deadline. So there's a couple of key kind of points in the schedule where there's a little more pressure to get your business done, so to speak. This year's roster freeze is going to come into effect at 11:59 p.m. on December the 19th and will take effect until 12:01 on December the 28th. During that time frame, there could be nobody placed on waivers, no players loaned to other teams or any other minor league affiliates, and no trades. So basically, when you're the couple of days leading into your Christmas break, holiday break, you can't be moved. So you can go spend time with your family and not have to worry about being traded and getting uprooted, which is something that the players negotiated a number of years back, I think it's a great thing, to be honest. The last thing you want to do is go home for the holidays and then find out you're traded and you have your life completely upended. So, and there's also no practicing on December the 24th, the 25th, or the 26th. So they have 3 mandated days off. The 27th would be normally like a travel day, and then Yeah, so most teams are going to go into their next game after the Christmas break without having a chance to practice first. Generally, that's how it goes for most teams anyway. So we'll see. That's what the dates are to pay attention to here as we get later into the month. Now, on the trade rumor front, we're going to talk about a variety of things. I want to take a look first at some information from Elliotte Friedman talking about the Philadelphia Flyers and the Vancouver Canucks. We know the Canucks, unfortunately, are a team not having a lot of success this year. A lot of uncertainty around some of the players' futures. Some guys have expiring contracts and uncertainty if they're going to be re-signed. Prime example of that is Kiefer Sherwood. You know, a guy who's a year out, but getting a lot of attention we know is Quinn Hughes. Obviously, Quinn's a unique situation, superstar player. They don't need to rush there. We don't believe there's been any updates at this point for them speaking to him about his future and agreeing to make a move or anything of that nature. We're not there yet, but it is something that's on the radar, and many insiders believe is a conversation between the two parties that will happen at some point in the not too distant future. Maybe it's before the Olympic break, maybe it's afterwards. I'm not sure, but it appears to be relatively imminent, just not yet. And what they decide also is not quite clear either. So it doesn't automatically mean it's going to lead to a trade, even though a lot of people suspect that the odds are pretty good of that. But time will tell. But like I said, Kiefer Sherwood's a prime name to watch, expiring contract, playing well, plays what many people brand as a playoff style of game. And the team that Elliott's been told to watch closely with various Canuck players is the Flyers. A lot of reasons for that is, for one, I think the whole management group and everybody agrees that there's a few players on that team that would fit well with Philly. Secondly, of course, is the Rick Tocchet connection. Of course, Rick Tocchet, now the head coach of the Flyers, who had coached the Canucks for a few years, knows a lot of those players very well. And if there's players that he likes, that plays the style he prefers, and guys that he knows that he wants to go to battle with, then yeah, they'll absolutely use every bit of knowledge from him and his influence to try to make moves to get those guys on their team. So I think Sherwood's a possibility, but there's going to be a lot of interest in that player. We've heard about Montreal. We've heard Minnesota. We've heard Columbus is interested in Sherwood. And I can pretty much guarantee there's at least 5 to 10 others. There's going to be a heavy interest in him, which is why most insiders believe they will be able to get a first-round pick when that's all said and done. But those are some of the names to watch. I wouldn't even completely rule out like a Derek Forbort or even a Tyler Myers. There could be a lot of movement in Vancouver. It's kind of difficult to say, but clearly Elliott's been told by multiple of his sources to watch the Canucks and the Flyers. There's a lot of conversations happening and a lot of guys that talk alike, so it wouldn't be shocking to see them get at least one via trade. So we'll have to monitor that situation moving forward here. Elliotte was also talking today about Laurent Broissoit and his future with the Chicago Blackhawks, which we know is going to be coming to an end soon enough. He's been loaned already to the American Hockey League after being out injured for the better part of a year and a half. Broissoit does have a good history in the league of strong play, but it's been a long time, of course, since he's been able to play a game and, show what he can do. And so really the league is not so much about your resume, it's about what have you done for me lately. That just is quite common, especially in guys that are not necessarily known to be long-time superstars and have a bigger resume to kind of showcase. But Broissoit's a guy that's been a pretty, I'd call adequate NHL goaltender for a few teams. Had good success in Winnipeg, had good success in Vegas, played in Edmonton back in the day before when he was getting started. So, there's enough there. The teams are looking for upgrades. The problem is he's making over $3 million. So according to Elliotte, the big thing here is that if the Blackhawks, if for a team that's willing to pay and take on his full cap hit, that they're really not looking for much of anything just to get the contract off the books, and they'll take their cap space back. So you're looking at, it might even be future considerations, or maybe it's like a really late pick or like a B, C level prospect, something. It's not going to be anything of substance, nothing that you're going to be really thinking twice about at all. But if you want some salary retained and you want to knock that number down to $2 million or whatever, then it's going to cost more, and that's only fair. That's how teams use the salary retention tool to their benefit, is by extracting a better return out of the teams they're dealing with. So, it's going to be upgraded to, at the very least, a higher level draft pick, or maybe a higher level prospect, maybe a combination of two. It's hard to say, but Broissoit can be had for cheap if you're willing to take the full hit. But for some of the teams that are contenders, the full hit will be a problem. So he may not necessarily go to a contending team. Some of the more usual suspects we've talked about for upgrading the goaltending position, it's possible he ends up with another team that might be lower in the standings and looking to give them a chance to play, just to kind of help audition or mentor their young guys. It could be a whole different scenario. So it's really difficult to say where he ends up right now. As I mentioned, another piece from Elliot, and then we'll get into the Habs talk, which came from Dave Pagnotta. Elliot's also had some comments on the Sabres today, kind of reiterating, if you will, that before the season started, it was made well known to the Sabres management group, ownership, like anybody who's there willing to listen, that their top guys like Rasmus Dahlin and Tage Thompson made it perfectly clear that they need to see good progress this year, and the team has to be taking really good steps forward in order to convince them that they should stick around and be a part of the solution and basically not ask for a trade to get out of Dodge. The Sabres have seen that happen way too many times with top players. Look at how many star players have gone on to win Stanley Cups or have great success on other teams. I don't know that the fan base can take another one going and happening. And you know darn well that if either of those guys were to leave, especially if they're traded to a contender, that it's quite possible it could happen again, maybe even multiple times if both were to leave. So it's not a scenario that really anybody wants to see happen. But like I said, we saw the Sabres have a rough start to the season. Josh Norris came back a couple games ago. They had a really good game, picked up 2 points, but then they put up a stinker the next game. So, it's obviously a step forward, step back type of scenario. This team is not completely out of it. If they can string together even a, small to mediocre win streak of 3 to 5 games, it can make a huge difference on where they're at in the standings. At any given time in that Atlantic division, you're getting teams that are, win 1 or 2, lose 1, or, lose 1, win 1. Like nobody really, the Tampa Bay Lightning are starting slowly to run away with it, but it's still pretty open for the most part. So, it seems like for the most part, Ottawa and Montreal keep going back and grabbing those 2-3 spots, but there's other teams that are there, and it's for the taking. It's not closed off. But Thompson, I think out of the two, if I had to pick which one was more likely to get moved, if it came down to it, I would pick Thompson, just because I know Rasmus Dahlin's had a challenging year, just because of everything going on off the ice with his fiance. We know that there's been a lot of health issues, and I know the Sabres have been really good to him about handling all that. So he might be a little more patient, maybe. I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, they would both be tremendous assets that a lot of teams would salivate over the idea of getting. I'm sure they would get big returns, but it's not something that we really want to do. But they're not at a stage yet where they've asked for that. So it's just something that Elliot's brought up to kind of make mention of, just reiterating this was something that came up before the season. They're not in a great spot right now. It's still kind of up and down. And clearly, if it doesn't get better before it gets later into the year, it's something that could be brought by them to management to say, we're not happy and we'd like to move on. So we'll see. The other scenario that was brought up today was one by Dave Pagnotta. It's not the first time we've heard chatter around Montreal and goaltending. Pagnotta himself has brought it up on other occasions. Elliott's brought it up, and other insiders too, that the Habs have been a little bit concerned of their recent stretch of goaltending, primarily Montembeault more than anybody else. Dobush, I think, for the most part, has been the better goaltender. Dobush had a little bit of a rough stretch too. There was a gap there where they were both not doing the greatest, but Dobush has kind of bounced back out of it, where Montembeault is, for the most part, hasn't. He's had the odd game that's been a little bit better, but then he hasn't been able to string together multiple good ones yet. So there's real concern over that, and if the team is where it's at in the standings while not getting great goaltending. Ottawa's in the same boat. A lot of that, though, was early on was really bad. It's been a more stable lately, but in the grand scheme of things, people look at the stats, it's not pretty. It's the same with Montembeault, right? He had a rough start. He's had some better games, but they're not consistently coming yet. And Montreal might feel like they don't have a lot of patience to wait because they want to get into the playoffs for the second year in a row. They like to make other moves. And Pagnotta links them to maybe be looking at Jordan Binnington out of St. Louis, who's on a pending expiring contract here. Stanley Cup winner. Many people think that there's a really high chance Binnington does get moved this year and that he's probably not part of the Blues retool after the season. So it's probably time to really look and find a new home for this guy who's, obviously had some rough games, but I know one of the top analytics when it comes to goaltender, Steve Valiquette, was looking at a lot of the numbers when it comes to some of these goaltenders. And the belief is that if you look at Binnington and you put him like in an Oilers net, for example, based on how Binnington plays and the goals that the Oilers have let in, the belief is based on the models that he would have probably prevented at least 16 additional goals for the Oilers than Skinner has, or Skinner Pickard combined. So again, just because a guy's playing poorly or not getting great results, this sometimes is reflective of the team in front of him, and sometimes a different environment, different scenario, different players can make a difference. So we will see what happens, but I mean, clearly Montreal has Fowler in the minors, who I think is the goalie of the future. Adding a veteran like Binnington, if he were to come in and settle things down the way that Montembeault's kind of been expected to, then maybe you have a scenario where maybe Binnington doesn't stay super long and he works with Dobos just to buy Fowler time. Maybe he's more of a placeholder for a year or two. They let Fowler really kind of hone in on his craft in the minors, and then it eventually becomes Fowler Dobos here, not too far down the road. But interesting to note that Montreal's now been mentioned when it comes to Binnington and potentially making a move. Be real curious to see how things play out in the next couple of months. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news or rumors in the comments, and we will discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We will keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.